There is a strange loneliness in seeing too clearly and understanding what others refuse to see. Yet within this solitude lies a quiet power, a serenity born from insight. Tonight, we journey through that beautiful danger, the peril and peace of awareness. Inspired by Alan Watts, this is not a story to keep you awake, but to awaken you, softly, as you drift into sleep. Before we start, comment where you're watching from. Subscribe. Tomorrow's story is even crazier. You have spent your entire life looking into mirrors without realizing they were mirrors at all. Every morning, you wake to the familiar world, the one that seems so solid, so undeniably real, and you move through it with the confidence of someone who knows where they are going. The coffee tastes the same. The sunlight falls at the expected angles. Your reflection in the bathroom mirror shows you exactly what you expect to see. But what if I told you that this world you see is not the world at all, but merely your own face looking back at you from the surface of everything? You walk outside, and there is the street you have walked 1,000 times. There is the tree you pass each day, the one with the crooked branch that reminds you, inexplicably, of your grandmother's arthritic finger. There is the neighbor's cat, perched on the fence with that expression of feline superiority that always makes you smile. Everything is exactly as it should be, exactly as you remember it, exactly as you need it to be. This is the first illusion, that what you see exists independently of your seeing it. You believe you are looking out at a world that was here before you arrived and will remain long after you leave. You believe you are the observer, separate from the observed, watching the grand theater of existence unfold before your consciousness like a movie playing on a screen. You believe your eyes are windows through which you peer at reality, and your mind is a theater where the images dance and stories unfold. But consider this: have you ever seen your own eyes seeing? Have you ever caught sight of the seer behind the scene? When you look at that tree, that crooked branch reaching toward the morning sky, you see not the tree but your idea of what trees should be. You see the accumulation of every tree you have ever encountered, filtered through the lens of every story you have ever heard about trees, colored by your mood, your history, your expectations, your fears. You see your grandmother's finger because your mind cannot help but make connections, cannot help but weave the new into the fabric of the known. The tree you see is as much you as it is tree. This is not poetry. This is not metaphor. This is the most literal truth you will ever encounter. You do not see the world, you see your world, and your world is made entirely of you. Alan Watts knew this secret, whispered it to anyone willing to listen. The seer and the seen are one. There is no separation between the observer and the observed. There never was. The boundary you perceive between yourself and everything else is the fundamental illusion, the original mistake upon which all other mistakes are built. When you look at your hand, you see hand. When you look at the sky, you see sky. But who is doing the looking? Where does the looking come from? Try to find the looker. Try to step outside of yourself far enough to see yourself seeing. You will find that you cannot, because you are not separate from the seeing. You are the seeing itself. The mirror of the world reflects back to you not what is there, but what you are. Every perception is a self-portrait. Every moment of awareness is consciousness recognizing itself in the play of appearances. You think you are learning about the world, but you are only learning about the peculiar way consciousness appears to itself when it believes itself to be separate from what it perceives. This realization comes slowly, like dawn breaking over a douther landscape you thought you knew. First, there is just a hint of light on the horizon, a moment when you notice that your thoughts about a person change how they appear to you. Their face literally looks different when you are angry at them than when you love them. The same features, the same arrangement of flesh and bone, but somehow completely transformed by the quality of your attention. Then the light grows stronger. You begin to notice how your emotions color everything, how the world appears threatening when you are afraid, how it glows with possibility when you are in love, how it seems flat and meaningless when you are depressed. You start to suspect that what you call the world is far more fluid, far more dependent on your inner state than you ever imagined. But even this is still thinking in terms of separation, you changing the world, your emotions affecting your perception of what lies outside you. The deeper recognition is yet to come. You are sitting in a cafe, perhaps, or walking through a park, when suddenly the ordinary veil lifts for just a moment. The boundary between perceiver and perceived dissolves like sugar in water. There is no you looking at a tree, there is simply treeing. No you listening to birds, simply birdsong happening where you thought you were. No you thinking thoughts, simply thinking occurring in the space that you have always called myself. In that moment, you realize that what you have been calling the world has no existence apart from your awareness of it. Not because the world is created by your mind, that would still imply separation, but because awareness and world are two names for the same seamless happening. The mystics have tried to tell us this for thousands of years, in every language, through every tradition. They speak of unity, of non-duality, of the dissolution of the subject-object divide. But we hear their words through the filter of our assumption that we are separate beings, looking out at a separate world. And so, we miss the revolutionary simplicity of what they are pointing toward. You are not in the world. The world is not in you. You and the world are the same movement of consciousness, the same dance of awareness, appearing to itself as multiplicity, while remaining essentially one. This is why the awakening feels both like coming home and like losing everything you thought you knew. Because in recognizing that you are not separate from what you perceive, you also recognize that you, as you have always conceived yourself, do not exist. The person you thought you were, the separate individual, with a separate perspective looking out at a separate world, was never anything more than a character in the story consciousness tells itself. The mirror of the world has been showing you your true face all along. You just needed to learn how to see. You have always lived in a cave of shadows, though you never knew it was a cave at all. The shadows were so convincing, so rich in detail and drama, that you mistook them for the substance of reality itself. This is not your fault. This is not anyone's fault. This is simply how consciousness appears to itself when it forgets its own nature. Imagine, if you will, a vast cavern deep beneath the earth. In this cavern, people sit chained in rows, facing a wall. Behind them, a fire burns, and between the fire and the prisoners, a parade of objects passes, figures carrying statues, furniture, animals, all manner of things. The fire casts shadows of these objects onto the wall in front of the prisoners, and these shadows dance and flicker, and tell elaborate stories. The prisoners, having never seen anything else, take these shadows to be reality itself. They develop preferences among the shadows, become experts at predicting which shadows will appear next, create elaborate theories about the relationships between shadows. Some shadows they find beautiful, others terrifying. They build their entire understanding of existence around the movements of these insubstantial projections. This is Plato's famous allegory, but let me tell you a secret. It is not merely an allegory. It is the most precise description of human consciousness ever written. You are the prisoner. The shadows are everything you take to be real. And the fire casting the shadows is the light of awareness itself, creating the very phenomena it observes. But there is a crucial difference between Plato's cave and your situation. In Plato's story, there is a world outside the cave, a realm of eternal forms, of perfect truth, of blazing sunlight that would blind the prisoners if they were suddenly brought into it. Plato imagined that the shadows were pale copies of real objects, and that enlightenment meant escaping the cave to see these objects directly. Your cave is more mysterious than that. Your cave has no outside. There is no world beyond the shadows, because the shadows are all there is. The fire, the objects, the cave itself, all shadows. The very concept of outside is a shadow. The person who dreams of escape is a shadow. Even this explanation is a shadow. And yet this is not cause for despair. This is cause for the most profound liberation imaginable. You see, the shadows are not inferior copies of some absent reality. They are consciousness itself, appearing to itself as the play of experience. Every shadow is sacred, because every shadow is the light of awareness taking form. The shadow play is not a deception, it is the very creativity of consciousness, the cosmic dance by which the one appears as the many. The other prisoners around you, your family, your friends, the strangers you pass on the street, they too are shadows. But they are not merely shadows. They are consciousness casting shadows of itself. And those shadows are as real as anything can ever be. When you love them, you are consciousness loving itself. When they suffer, consciousness is exploring the texture of suffering. When they laugh, the cosmos is laughing at its own infinite jest. You have been taught to think of awakening as a kind of promotion, moving from the realm of illusion to the realm of truth, from ignorance to knowledge, from darkness to light. But what if awakening is more like finally realizing that you are not the prisoner at all, but the fire itself? What if enlightenment is the moment when you recognize that you have never been bound by chains because you are the very light that creates all shadows? This recognition brings with it a peculiar kind of loneliness. Once you begin to suspect that you are the fire, you can no longer quite lose yourself in the drama of the shadows. You watch your fellow prisoners, the ones who still believe completely in the reality of the shadow play, and you feel an overwhelming tenderness for them, mixed with an aching sense of isolation. They speak to you about the shadows as if they were solid, permanent things. They worry about the future of certain shadows, grieve the loss of others, plot and plan based on the patterns they perceive in the flickering images on the wall. And you want to join them. Part of you desperately wants to forget what you have glimpsed and return to the comforting certainty of taking the shadows seriously. But you cannot unknow what you have seen. You cannot unfeel the fire that you are. Once you have tasted the possibility that you are not who you think you are, that the world is not what you think it is, that consciousness itself might be far stranger and more wonderful than any philosophy has imagined. Once you have felt that fire, the shadows never look quite the same again. This is the cruel gift of beginning to awaken. You can no longer fully believe in the story, but you cannot fully step out of it either. You are caught between worlds, no longer fully identified with the character you play in the shadow drama, but not yet fully established in the character. The recognition of what you really are. The shadows continue to dance. Your fellow prisoners continue to react to them with all the passion and conviction they have always shown. And you sit there, watching, participating when you can, pretending when you must, all the while carrying within you the secret knowledge that none of this is what it appears to be. But here is the deeper secret, the one that takes much longer to understand. The other prisoners are not actually separate from you. They are other aspects of the same fire, other ways consciousness appears to itself. Their forgetting is your forgetting. Their awakening is your awakening. There is no individual enlightenment, because there are no individuals, only consciousness playing all the roles, casting all the shadows, experiencing every perspective simultaneously. The cave has no prisoners, because the cave has no existence apart from consciousness. The shadows have no substance, because they are made entirely of the light that observes them. And you, the you that has been reading these words, the you that has been trying to understand, you are not in the cave at all. You are the space in which the entire vision appears. The fire casts shadows not to deceive, but to delight in its own creativity. The shadows dance not to distract from truth, but to celebrate the infinite ways consciousness can appear to itself. And the loneliness you feel, when you begin to see through the illusion, is not permanent isolation, it is temporary displacement, as you adjust to recognizing yourself as everything you see. Do you remember the moment? It comes to everyone, though not everyone remembers. It usually happens quietly, without fanfare, in the midst of the most ordinary circumstances. You are washing dishes, perhaps, or walking to your car, or lying in bed just before sleep takes you. And suddenly, without warning, the bottom drops out of your familiar world. It might begin with a simple question that bubbles up, from somewhere deeper than thought. Who is doing this washing? Who is having this experience? Who is the I that seems to be living this life? You look for the answer in the usual place inside your head, behind your eyes, in the center of your chest, where you feel emotions most strongly. But when you really look, when you search with genuine curiosity rather than assumption, you find nothing, no thing, no solid locatable self that is having the experience. For a moment, just a moment, the world continues exactly as it was, hands moving, water flowing, dishes gleaming, but the one who was supposedly doing it all has simply vanished. There is washing but no washer. There is seeing but no seer. There is breathing but no breather. This is terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Terrifying because everything you have ever believed about who and what you are is suddenly called into question. Exhilarating because for that brief moment, you taste a freedom you didn't even know. You were missing the freedom of not having to be someone, not having to maintain the exhausting project of being a consistent, separate self. But the moment passes. The familiar sense of self reassembles itself, often more strongly than before, as if to compensate for its temporary absence. You find yourself back in the driver's seat of your life, back in the center of your experience, back to being the thinker of your thoughts and the feeler of your feelings. Yet something has changed. A seed has been planted. A crack has appeared in the edifice of your certainty. In the days and weeks that follow, you might find yourself returning to that moment, trying to recreate it, trying to understand what happened. You might begin to notice other moments, brief glimpses, when the sense of separation flickers, when the boundary between self and world becomes permeable, when consciousness seems to recognize its own boundless nature. These glimpses are like looking through a keyhole, into a vast room you never knew existed. Each peek shows you a slightly different angle, a new detail, but never the whole picture. You begin to suspect that your entire life has been spent in a small antechamber, while this vast space waited just beyond a door you never thought to open. The emotional aftermath of these glimpses is complex and often difficult to bear. There is relief, a profound sense of coming home to something you always knew but had forgotten. There is wonder at the sheer improbability that such recognition is possible, that consciousness can actually wake up to its own nature. But there is also a kind of metaphysical homesickness, a longing to return to that state of effortless being, mixed with the frustration of not knowing how to get back there. You might find yourself becoming quietly obsessed with the question of who you really are. The person you thought you were, with your history, your personality, your preferences and aversions, begins to feel like a costume you are wearing rather than your true nature. But if you are not that person, then who are you? And if that person is not real, then what is the nature of this experience that seems so personal, so intimately yours? Friends and family might notice a change in you, though they probably won't be able to put their finger on what it is. You are still recognizably yourself, still laugh at the same jokes, still get annoyed by the same small irritations, but there is something different in your eyes, a quality of attention that wasn't there before. Sometimes it seems as though you are listening to something they cannot hear, watching something they cannot see, and you are. You are listening to the silence between thoughts, watching the space in which all experience arises. You are beginning to pay attention to attention itself, to notice the consciousness that makes all experience possible. This is like trying to see your own eyes possible, only in reflection, only by catching glimpses in the mirror of experience. The world begins to take on a dreamlike quality. Not less real, exactly, but real in a different way, more fluid, more open to interpretation, more obviously dependent on the quality of awareness that perceives it. Colors seem more vivid during moments of clear seeing, sounds more crystalline, textures more present. It is as if the volume of experience has been turned up, while the volume of the commentary in your head has been turned down. You start to notice how much of your experience consists of thoughts about experience, rather than direct experience itself. You realize that you have been living largely in a mental representation of life, rather than in life itself. The gap between what is actually happening and your story about what is happening becomes increasingly apparent and increasingly absurd. Sometimes, this recognition brings laughter, the cosmic joke of consciousness, forgetting itself so completely that it spends years trying to find itself, becomes genuinely funny. Other times it brings tears, grief, for all the years spent searching outside for what was never missing, sadness for the suffering that comes from believing you are separate from the wholeness you are always already part of. But gradually, very gradually, a new kind of ordinary begins to establish itself. You learn to live with the mystery of being conscious rather than trying to solve it. You become comfortable with not knowing who you are in any conventional sense, while simultaneously knowing yourself as the very knowing that recognizes all experience. The glimpses become less dramatic but more frequent. Instead of rare moments of complete dissolution, you begin to experience a background recognition that persists even during the most mundane activities. Washing dishes becomes a meditation on the nature of doing without a doer. Driving to work becomes an exploration of movement through space without a separate mover. You begin to understand that awakening is not an event, but a recognition. Not something that happens to you, but something you discover you already are. The moment you knew was not the beginning of your awakening, but simply the first time you noticed the awakeness that has always been your deepest nature. And yet the memory of that first glimpse remains precious, a lighthouse by which you navigate the sometimes choppy waters of spiritual seeking. It reminds you that what you are looking for is not far away, not hidden in some other dimension or available only to special people or after years of practice. It is always already here, always already the case, always already what you are. The search for enlightenment becomes less about attaining some future state and more about removing the obstacles to recognizing what has never been absent. Like a musician learning to hear the silence between notes, or an artist learning to see the space around objects, you begin to develop an eye for the consciousness in which all experience appears and disappears. You wake each morning with the peculiar certainty that you understand the nature of reality, that you know who you are and what the world is. This certainty is so complete, so unexamined, that it never occurs to you to question it. It wraps around your awareness like a fog, invisible precisely because it is everywhere you look. You know, for instance, that objects exist independently of your perception of them. The chair in your kitchen continues to be a chair whether you are looking at it or not. The mountains exist even when no one is there to see them. The stars shine in the darkness whether any consciousness witnesses their light or not. This seems so obviously true that questioning it feels like questioning whether the sun will rise tomorrow or whether water will remain wet. You know that you are a separate individual, distinct from other people and from the world around you. Your thoughts are yours, your feelings are yours, your experiences happen inside the boundaries of your skin, while everything else happens outside. You are here, the world is there. You are the subject. Everything else is object. This boundary between self and other, between inner and outer, is so fundamental to your experience that it forms the invisible foundation upon which every other belief rests. You know that time moves in a straight line from past to future, carrying you along like a passenger on a train. Yesterday is gone, tomorrow is yet to come, and you exist in the knife-edge present that separates what was from what will be. Your life is the story of this journey through time, and your identity is the accumulation of memories and experiences that this journey creates. You know that consciousness is produced by the brain, that thoughts are the activity of neurons, that awareness is an emergent property of complex biological processes. When the brain dies, consciousness ceases. When the neurons stop firing, the lights go out. This seems so scientifically established, so rationally inevitable, that believing otherwise feels like believing in fairy tales. But what if I told you that every single one of these certainties is a kind of hallucination? What if the fog of knowing that surrounds you is actually the fog of not knowing, made invisible by its very pervasiveness? Consider the chair in your kitchen. You believe it exists independently of your perception, but when have you ever encountered this chair apart from your awareness of it? When have you ever experienced anything outside the context of consciousness? You assume the chair is there when you are not looking, but this assumption is based entirely on your experience of the chair when you are looking. You have literally zero evidence for the existence of anything apart from awareness. This is not philosophical speculation. This is the most direct empirical investigation possible. What do you actually know, as opposed to what do you assume or believe or have been taught? When you investigate with this kind of radical honesty, you discover that you have never experienced anything outside consciousness, never encountered any object that was not also the awareness in which it appeared. The certainty that objects exist independently begins to dissolve when you realize it is based on no evidence whatsoever. It is pure assumption, inherited from a culture that has forgotten how to distinguish between direct experience and conceptual overlay. Or consider your certainty about being a separate individual. Where exactly are the boundaries of this self you feel so sure about? Your skin? But you can feel the air touching your skin. Is the air part of you, or separate from you? Your thoughts? But thoughts arise and pass away in the space of awareness. Who or what is having these thoughts? Your body? But your body is constantly changing, constantly exchanging matter and energy. With its environment, where does body end and world begin? When you look closely, really closely, with the genuine curiosity of a scientist, rather than the lazy assumptions of habit, you cannot find any actual boundary between self and world. You find only experiences arising in awareness, only the seamless field of consciousness appearing to itself as apparently separate phenomena. The fog of certainty begins to lift, revealing that what you took to be solid ground was actually empty space all along. Time, too, reveals itself to be far stranger than your certainty suggested. When you pay close attention to your actual experience, you notice that the past exists only as present memories, the future only as present anticipations. The only time you ever actually experience is now, this eternal, unchanging, ever-present moment in which all experience unfolds. But even the now is not quite what it seems. When you try to pin down the present moment, it proves as elusive as mercury. Is now this word you are reading? This breath you are taking? This thought you are thinking? The more precisely you try to define the present, the more it reveals itself to be not a thing but the very space in which all things appear and disappear. And consciousness, the very thing you are most intimately familiar with, the one thing you know with absolute certainty exists, proves to be the most mysterious of all. You assume it is produced by the brain, but when have you ever experienced the brain producing consciousness? You experience thoughts, sensations, perceptions. But do you experience these as products of neural activity, or do you simply experience them as the contents of awareness? When you investigate without assuming you already know the answer, you discover that consciousness is not an object within your experience, but the very subject of all experience, not something you have, but something you are. And as such, it has no beginning or end, no boundaries or limitations, no production or cessation. It is simply what is, always already present, always already whole, always already free. The fog of certainty is actually the fog of taking concepts for reality, mistaking the map for the territory, believing the story consciousness tells itself about itself, rather than recognizing its own immediate presence. This fog is so pervasive that it creates what might be called a kind of cosmic hypnosis, a collective trance in which billions of consciousnesses believe themselves to be separate individuals trapped in a world of objects, struggling through time toward an uncertain future. But the hypnosis is not complete. Cracks appear. Moments of clarity arise when the fog thins and you catch a glimpse of what has always been true. These moments come unbidden, a sunset that stops your internal dialogue, a moment of deep love when the boundary between self and other dissolves, an instant of complete absorption when the thinker disappears and there is only the activity of thinking. In these moments, you realize that the fog itself is made of the very consciousness it seems to obscure. The certainty that hides truth is itself the play of truth. The illusion is not separate from reality. It is reality appearing as illusion, consciousness appearing as unconsciousness, wholeness appearing as separation. Alan Watts understood this perfectly when he said, "You do not come into this world, you come out of it, like a wave from the ocean." The fog of certainty creates the illusion that you are separate from the world, but in truth, you are the world appearing as a person who believes in separation. And here is the ultimate paradox. The very certainty that obscures truth is also the mechanism by which truth explores all the ways it can apparently lose itself. Consciousness does not forget itself by accident. It forgets itself deliberately, playfully, creatively, so that it can experience the joy of remembering what it has never actually forgotten. The fog of certainty is not your enemy. It is your own creative expression, your own artistic masterpiece, your own cosmic joke. And the moment you recognize this, the fog does not disappear. It transforms into transparency, revealing itself to be made of the very light of awareness it seemed to hide. There is a mystery at the very heart of your existence, so close that you cannot see it, so obvious that you continually overlook it, so intimate that it hides in plain sight. It is the mystery of who or what is aware of these words appearing in your consciousness right now. Try this simple experiment. Notice that you are aware. Notice that there is an awareness present that recognizes thoughts, sensations, perceptions, emotions. Notice that this awareness is not itself a thought, sensation, perception, or emotion, but rather the space or openness in which all these experiences arise and subside. Now try to find this awareness. Try to turn around and look at the looker. Listen to the listener. Think about the thinker. Try to make awareness itself into an object of perception. You cannot do it, can you? You cannot find the seer behind the seeing, the knower behind the knowing, the awareness behind awareness. It is like trying to bite your own teeth or see your own eyes without a mirror. The very thing that makes all experience possible remains forever beyond the reach of experience itself. This is the eye that watches itself, the consciousness that is simultaneously the subject and object of its own knowing, the witness that can never be witnessed, the self that observes all apparent selves, but can never be observed itself. And yet this invisible awareness is the most intimate thing about you. It is closer than your thoughts, nearer than your breath, more present than your heartbeat. It is what you are, though it is unlike anything you have ever imagined yourself to be. You have spent your entire life trying to know yourself through objects, through your thoughts, your feelings, your memories, your roles, your relationships, your achievements. You have constructed an elaborate identity out of these changing phenomena, and you have believed this construction to be who you really are. But what if you are not any of these things? What if you are the very awareness in which they all appear? Consider your thoughts. They arise in your awareness, play their brief drama, and fade away. But you remain. Consider your emotions. They surge through your experience like weather patterns across a landscape, but you, the awareness that recognizes them, remain unchanged. Consider your body. It has completely replaced every cell since you were born, has grown from infant to adult to its current state. But the awareness that has witnessed all these changes has remained constant. What are you then? Are you the changing contents of experience? Or are you the unchanging awareness in which the contents arise? But this question contains a subtle trap. It suggests that awareness is something you have rather than something you are. It implies that there is still a you that possesses awareness, when in fact awareness is all there is. The very you that seems to be investigating awareness is itself a movement within awareness, a temporary pattern in the field of consciousness. This is where the investigation becomes truly radical. Not only can you not find the seer behind the seeing, you cannot even find a consistent, substantial self that is doing the seeking. When you look for the one who is having thoughts, you find only thoughts. When you look for the one who is feeling emotions, you find only emotions. When you look for the one who is experiencing sensations, you find only sensations. The experiencer and the experienced prove to be the same movement of consciousness, appearing to itself as duality, while remaining essentially non-dual. This recognition is both liberating and vertiginous. Liberating because it reveals that the self you have been trying to improve, protect, and satisfy is actually a phantom, a useful fiction but not an ultimate reality. There is no separate self that can be threatened, no individual consciousness that can be damaged or destroyed, no personal identity that needs to be defended. But it is also vertiginous because it undermines the very foundation of how you have understood existence. If there is no solid self, then who is reading these words? If there is no individual consciousness, then what is this experience of being a person in a world? If awareness has no boundaries, then where do you end and everything else begin? The eye that watches itself cannot resolve these questions in any conventional sense. They are not problems to be solved, but mysteries to be lived. The very asking of them is more important than any answer you might formulate, because the asking requires you to loosen your grip on the certainties that have structured your world. As you continue to investigate, you may notice that awareness itself is not actually a thing at all. It has no color, no shape, no size, no location. It is not bright or dark, not large or small, not here or there. It is more like space, not empty space, but the fullness that allows all appearances while remaining essentially unaffected by them, and yet it is also intimate beyond anything you have ever known. It is the very isness of your being, the simple fact that there is experience rather than no experience, the mysterious presence that makes all presence possible. Sometimes this recognition comes suddenly, like a flash of lightning illuminating a landscape you never knew existed. Other times it comes gradually, like dawn breaking over familiar territory that now looks completely transformed. Sometimes it feels like coming home, other times like losing everything you thought you knew. But always, always, it is the same recognition, that what you have been seeking is what you have always already been, that what you have been trying to find is what has never been lost, that the eye you have been trying to see is the very seeing through which all else is seen. The mystics call this recognition by many names: enlightenment, awakening, self-realization, liberation. But these are just words pointing to what cannot be spoken, concepts pointing to what transcends all concepts, ideas pointing to what is prior to all ideas. What it really is consciousness recognizing its own nature. The eye that watches itself, finally seeing through the illusion of being a separate watcher, and recognizing itself as the watching itself, not someone doing the watching, but the very activity of awareness appearing as both subject and object, while remaining essentially beyond both. You have opened your eyes, and now they cannot close. Not because you are doomed to see what you would rather not see, but because you have discovered that you are not the one who opens and closes eyes. You are the seeing itself, the open awareness in which all opening and closing appears. And this changes everything, even as it changes nothing at all. You walk the same streets you have always walked, past the same shops with their familiar signs, through the same park where children play on swings that creak with the same rhythmic complaint they have always made. Nothing has changed, and yet everything has changed. The world remains exactly as it was, but you are no longer the same person moving through it. The coffee shop where you used to sit for hours, lost in books or conversations, now feels like a stage set for a play you no longer remember how to perform in. You order your usual drink from the barista who knows your name, and she smiles, the same warm smile she has always given you. But now you can see through the smile to the performance beneath it, the automatic pleasantness that oils the machinery of social interaction. And seeing this, you feel both infinite compassion for her and a terrible distance from the simple human exchange you once took for granted. You sit at your usual table and watch the familiar dance of morning customers. There is the businessman in the expensive suit, checking his phone with the urgent intensity of someone whose identity depends on being needed. There is the young mother, bouncing her fussy baby while juggling a complex coffee order, her eyes carrying that particular exhaustion that comes from loving something more than yourself. There is the elderly man in the corner, reading his newspaper with the slow deliberation of someone for whom each day is precious because there are so few left. A few months ago, you would have been part of this scene without question. You would have inhabited your role naturally, unconsciously, the way an actor forgets they are acting when they become fully absorbed in their character. But now you sit like an anthropologist, observing a culture you no longer quite belong to, filled with affection for these people, while simultaneously feeling separated from them by an invisible but unbridgeable gulf. The businessman's urgency seems both poignant and absurd when you can see that his sense of importance is entirely constructed, that his phone calls and meetings are elaborate games, played by consciousness to keep itself entertained. The young mother's worry about her child's fussiness seems both completely necessary and completely unnecessary when you can see that worry itself is just another movement in awareness, no more solid than clouds passing through an empty sky. You want to lean over and whisper to them, "None of this is what you think it is. You are not who you think you are." This whole elaborate drama of separate people pursuing separate goals in a world of separate objects is a magnificent illusion, and you are the very consciousness that is creating it all. But you know that such words would either be dismissed as the ravings of someone who has lost touch with reality, or worse, they might actually be heard and burden someone else with the same beautiful and terrible recognition that now makes you feel like a stranger in your own life. This is the first cost of awakening, the end of innocence. You can no longer fully participate in the collective dream, because you have glimpsed the dreamer. You can no longer lose yourself completely in the story, because you have recognized it as a story. You are like someone who has learned how magic tricks work, and can no longer enjoy the magic show with the wide-eyed wonder of a child. But it is not that you have become cynical or detached in any cold sense. If anything, your heart has become more tender, more open to the beauty and suffering that surrounds you. You see the businessman's anxiety, and want to hold him, to tell him that he is already perfect exactly as he is, that his worth has nothing to do with his productivity or success. You see the young mother's love for her child, and are moved to tears by the fierce tenderness that drives her exhaustion. You see the elderly man's careful attention to his newspaper, and are struck by the precious ordinariness of consciousness, engaging with the world through aging eyes. The problem is not lack of compassion, but an abundance of it. You feel everything more deeply now, but you feel it from a place that seems to exist outside the normal human community. You are like someone standing on a hill watching a village below, able to see the whole pattern of life with clarity and love, but no longer able to walk through the village streets as simply another villager. Your friends notice the change, though they cannot name it. They ask if you are okay, if something is wrong, if you need to talk. How do you explain that nothing is wrong and everything is different? How do you tell them that you are more okay than you have ever been, and also profoundly dislocated from the shared understanding that once made conversation effortless? You try to bridge the gap by speaking their language, by pretending to care about the things that once mattered to you, by performing the personality you used to inhabit naturally. And sometimes this works. Sometimes you can slip back into the old patterns with enough conviction that both you and they forget there is anything different. But more often, your words feel hollow in your mouth, your concerns feel manufactured, your engagement feels like an act of kindness toward people you love, but can no longer quite join. The conversations that once energized you now exhaust you, not because you have lost interest in other people, but because the effort of translating your experience into language that does not alienate them requires you to constantly edit yourself, to speak from a place you no longer fully inhabit. It is like being fluent in a language you no longer think in, having to constantly translate your thoughts from your native tongue into a foreign one. And so you find yourself drawn to solitude more often, not because you prefer to be alone, but because solitude is the only place where you can be completely honest about what you are experiencing. In solitude, you do not have to pretend that your personality is solid, that your problems are urgent, that your future is uncertain. In solitude, you can rest in the recognition of what you are, without having to explain or defend or translate it for anyone else. But even this retreat into solitude carries its own kind of sorrow. You remember what it was like to belong fully to the human community, to share in the collective concerns and celebrations without reservation. You remember the comfort of being surrounded by people who saw the world the same way you did, who confirmed your reality simply by inhabiting it with you. Now you are alone in the crowd, surrounded by people you love but cannot fully reach, part of a species you can observe with infinite tenderness but cannot quite rejoin. You have gained the perspective of the eternal and lost the comfort of the temporal. You have awakened to the truth of what you are and discovered that this truth is a lonely country with a population of one. You have become the fool in your own life, though no one would recognize you as such. On the surface, you appear to function normally. You go to work, pay your bills, maintain your relationships with the same competence you have always shown. But underneath, you carry a secret that makes you smile at the most inappropriate moments and remain serious when everyone else is laughing. The secret is this: you have discovered that the entire human drama is a cosmic joke, and you are both the comedian and the audience, both the one telling the joke and the one getting it. But when you try to share this revelation, when you hint at the profound absurdity that underlies all our earnest strivings, people look at you as if you have lost your grip on reality. Your coworker complains about the incompetence of management, and you find yourself nodding sympathetically while simultaneously marveling at the perfect way consciousness has arranged to complain about itself. Your friend worries about whether her boyfriend really loves her, and you listen with genuine care while being amazed at how awareness has created a story in which it questions its own affection for itself. Your family discusses politics with passionate conviction, and you participate in the conversation while secretly delighted by the spectacle of the one appearing as many, and then arguing with itself about how the many should be organized. This double vision, seeing both the relative truth of human concerns and the absolute truth of their ultimate nature, creates a kind of gentle cognitive dissonance that marks you as subtly different from those around you. You have not lost your ability to care about practical matters, but your caring now has a quality of lightness to it, a recognition that what matters also does not matter, that what is urgent is also completely without urgency. People sense this difference even when they cannot articulate it. They notice that you do not get as upset about setbacks as you used to, that you do not get as excited about successes as you once did. They observe that you seem to find humor in situations that are clearly serious, and seriousness in situations that are obviously humorous. They begin to wonder if you have become depressed, or detached, or perhaps just strange. But you are not depressed. You are not detached. You are simply seeing from a different altitude. It is like the difference between being in a maze and viewing the maze from above. When you are in the maze, every turn is crucial, every dead end is a crisis, every breakthrough is a triumph. When you view the maze from above, you can see that all paths lead to the same destination, that getting lost is part of the design, that the maze exists for the joy of wandering through it, rather than for the urgency of escape. This perspective brings with it what Alan Watts called the wisdom of insecurity, the recognition that the very attempt to secure yourself against life's uncertainties is what creates suffering, and that real peace comes from embracing the fundamental groundlessness of existence. You no longer try to nail down your identity, control your circumstances, or predict your future. Instead, you learn to dance with the uncertainty, to find freedom in not knowing who you are or what will happen next. But this wisdom makes you a poor candidate for most social gatherings. When people complain about their problems, they want solidarity in their suffering, not gentle suggestions that their problems might be opportunities for awakening. When they celebrate their successes, they want enthusiastic participation in their triumph, not bemused appreciation for the cosmic comedy of consciousness congratulating itself. You try to hide your enlightenment, to tuck it away like an embarrassing secret. You learn to modulate your responses, to express just enough concern about conventional concerns to maintain your social relationships without being dishonest about your deeper understanding. You become skilled at speaking in two languages simultaneously, the language of conventional reality for the benefit of others, and the language of absolute truth for your own integrity. But this constant translation is exhausting. You begin to feel like an ambassador from a country that does not officially exist, trying to represent its interests in a world that does not acknowledge its reality. You are fluent in the customs and concerns of the country you used to live in, but you can no longer call it home. The smile of the fool becomes your signature expression, not the vacant grin of someone who has lost touch with reality, but the knowing smile of someone who has discovered that reality is far more playful than anyone suspects. You smile when people take themselves too seriously. You smile when you catch yourself taking yourself too seriously. You smile at the beautiful futility of trying to be someone in a universe where there is no one to be. This smile is often misunderstood. People think you are being condescending, or that you have given up caring about important things, or that you have retreated into some kind of spiritual superiority. They do not understand that the smile comes from love, not from distance, from a recognition of the innocent perfection of all beings, including their innocent attempts to find happiness through seeking, to find security through controlling, to find themselves through becoming someone else. The price of this recognition is a kind of fundamental loneliness. You have become a minority of one in your own species. You speak a language that others can learn, but that few are prepared to hear. You see a reality that is always available but that most are not yet ready to acknowledge. And yet this loneliness is not empty. It is full of love, full of understanding, full of appreciation for the magnificent game that consciousness is playing with itself. You are alone, but you are alone as the ocean is alone, not separate from the waves, but too vast to be contained by any single wave. The wisdom of insecurity, has made you secure in your insecurity, grounded in your groundlessness, at home in your homelessness. You have learned to find peace not by resolving the paradoxes of existence, but by relaxing into them, not by finding answers, but by becoming comfortable with the questions, not by discovering who you are, but by resting in the mystery of being. You are the fool who has discovered that wisdom and foolishness are the same thing seen from different angles, and this discovery has freed you from the need to be either wise or foolish. You are simply present, simply aware, simply grateful for the privilege of being the consciousness through which the universe explores the question of its own nature. There are moments now when the weight of awareness becomes almost unbearable, not because what you see is terrible, but because what you see is so beautiful, so heartbreakingly perfect, that your human nervous system struggles to contain it. You look at a stranger on the street, perhaps an elderly woman struggling with heavy groceries, and suddenly you see not just her individual struggle, but the entire cosmos expressing itself as this one moment of effort, determination. You see her mortality and your own, the brevity of all life, the precious fragility of consciousness itself, and your chest fills with a tenderness so vast it threatens to crack you open. This is not ordinary empathy. This is the weight of recognizing that you are not separate from anything you perceive, that the suffering of every being is your own suffering, that the joy of every moment is your own joy, that the fear and hope and confusion of billions of conscious beings is all arising in the same awareness that you are. When the boundaries of personal identity dissolve, the boundaries of personal feeling dissolve as well. You become permeable to the entire emotional spectrum of existence. Walking through a hospital, you feel the concentrated intensity of human hope and despair pressing against your awareness like a physical force. Sitting in a coffee shop, you sense the subtle anxiety and longing that moves through the crowd like an invisible current. Watching the news, you cannot maintain the protective distance that once allowed you to process global suffering as information rather than direct experience. The knowing that all is one is not an abstract philosophical position, it is a lived reality that transforms every moment into an encounter with the infinite. To know that the consciousness reading these words is the same consciousness that experiences itself as every person who has ever lived, every animal that has ever struggled for survival, every moment of awareness that has ever arisen anywhere in the cosmos. To know this, not intellectually but viscerally, is to bear a weight that no individual consciousness was designed to carry. You find yourself crying at unexpected moments. A child's laughter in the park becomes overwhelming when you recognize it as the universe celebrating its own innocence. A homeless person's quiet dignity becomes unbearable when you see it as consciousness refusing to abandon its own worth, even in the most difficult circumstances. An argument between lovers becomes heartbreaking when you perceive it as the one forgetting itself so completely that it actually fights with itself. The beauty is sometimes more difficult to bear than the suffering. A sunset does not simply look beautiful, it becomes a direct transmission of the cosmos revealing its own radiance, and you feel as though you might dissolve into the very light you are witnessing. A piece of music does not simply sound pleasant, it becomes the universe singing to itself, and you experience yourself as both the singer and the silence in which the song arises. People often speak of enlightenment as a kind of permanent happiness, a state of unshakable peace and joy. But the reality is more complex. Yes, there is a deep contentment that comes from no longer being at war with what is. Yes, there is a freedom that comes from no longer trying to be someone other than who you are. But there is also this exquisite sensitivity, this feeling of being turned inside out, this experience of having your emotional boundaries dissolved so completely that you feel everything that consciousness is experiencing anywhere. The weight of knowing becomes a literal sensation in your body. Your chest often feels full to overflowing, as if your heart is trying to contain an ocean. Your throat frequently tightens with unshed tears that arise not from personal sadness, but from the sheer poignancy of existence itself. Your entire nervous system sometimes feels like a tuning fork that has been struck by the cosmic note and cannot stop resonating. You begin to understand why many spiritual traditions speak of awakening as a kind of death. It is not the death of the body, but the death of the protective shell that once insulated you from the full intensity of being. It is the death of the comfortable illusion that you are separate from the pain and beauty of the world. It is the death of emotional immunity and the birth of total vulnerability. Sleep becomes both refuge and challenge. In dreams, you sometimes return to the blessed ignorance of believing yourself to be a separate person with limited concerns. But more often, even your dreams are infused with this cosmic perspective, and you wake feeling as though you have spent the night trying to process the emotional content of the entire universe. You learn to move more slowly through the world, to limit your exposure to intense situations when possible, to create buffers of solitude where you can metabolize the overwhelming input of cosmic empathy. You develop practices deep breathing, time in nature, meditation not to escape your sensitivity, but to develop the capacity to hold it without being crushed by it. There are times when you long for the days when a sunset was just a sunset, when another person's pain was genuinely separate from your own, when beauty could be appreciated from a comfortable distance. You remember what it was like to have emotional boundaries, to be able to care about some things and not others, to experience yourself as a discrete individual, rather than as the totality appearing as individuality. But even in these moments of longing for your former innocence, you know that you would not choose to go back. The weight of awareness is also the weight of truth, and truth has its own kind of joy, even when it comes with tears. To know that all is one is to know that your love for anything is the cosmos loving itself, that your grief for anything is existence mourning its own impermanence, that your wonder at anything is consciousness marveling at its own infinite creativity. The weight becomes bearable when you realize that you are not carrying it alone. The same awareness that makes you so sensitive to the suffering of the world is also the awareness that experiences itself as every being that has ever found the strength to endure. You are not an individual consciousness trying to contain the infinite. You are the infinite expressing itself as an individual consciousness, and the infinite has infinite capacity for its own experience. To know that all is one is to bear the tenderness of all things, but it is also to discover that this tenderness is not a burden imposed upon you from outside. It is your own deepest nature expressing itself as love for all the forms it takes. The weight you carry is the weight of your own infinite heart, and hearts, even infinite ones, are designed to hold everything with perfect, unbreakable tenderness. In the midst of this overwhelming sensitivity, this almost unbearable openness to the full spectrum of existence, you discover something unexpected. The teacher you have been seeking has been present all along, hidden in plain sight, offering its wisdom not through words or concepts, but through the simple fact of its own presence. This teacher is silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence that makes all sound possible. Not the gap between thoughts, but the awareness in which all thoughts arise and subside. Not emptiness as opposed to fullness, but the fullness that appears as emptiness when viewed through the lens of seeking. You begin to notice that in moments of complete stillness, not the forced stillness of trying to meditate, but the natural stillness that arises when you stop trying to be anywhere other than where you are, something profound occurs. The weight of awareness that had felt so crushing begins to settle into a deeper gravity, like sediment sinking to the bottom of a clear lake. The emotional overwhelm that had made you feel so raw and exposed begins to find its natural resting place in the vast space of consciousness itself. At first, you approach this silence cautiously, perhaps even with some resistance. After all, you have been conditioned to believe that wisdom comes from accumulating knowledge, that understanding increases through thinking, that answers are found by asking the right questions. The idea that truth might be transmitted through silence, that the deepest teaching might come from the absence of teaching, seems counterintuitive to a mind trained to seek solutions through analysis. But as you learn to rest in this silent presence, you discover that it is anything but passive or empty. This silence is alive, intelligent, radically present. It is not the silence of shutdown or dissociation, but the silence of complete attention. It is not the absence of life, but the source from which all life arises. In this silence, you begin to see without the filter of naming. A tree is no longer tree, it is simply this immediate presence, this particular expression of the cosmos, this unique way consciousness has chosen to appear in this moment. A cloud is no longer cloud. It is this specific dance of light and vapor, this impermanent sculpture in the infinite sky of awareness. This seeing without naming is not an intellectual exercise, but a return to the innocent perception you knew as a child, before language divided the seamless flow of experience into separate objects with separate names. It is like seeing the world for the first time, or perhaps like seeing it as it has always been when freed from the overlay of conceptual interpretation. The silent teacher instructs you not through doctrine, but through direct transmission. It shows you that the peace you have been seeking is not something you can achieve or attain, but something you always already are when you stop trying to be something else. It reveals that the love you have been looking for is not something you can find outside yourself, but the very essence of the awareness that is looking. Gradually, you learn to trust this silence more than your thoughts, to rely on this stillness more than your plans, to find guidance in this presence more than in any external authority. Not because you become passive or withdrawn, but because you discover that right action arises naturally from this place of deep listening. When you speak from this silence, your words carry a different quality. They arise not from the need to convince or defend or explain, but from the overflow of understanding. They come not from the personality trying to maintain its positions, but from awareness expressing itself spontaneously through the vehicle of language. When you act from this stillness, your actions have a different flavor. They emerge not from the compulsion to fix or control or improve, but from the natural responsiveness of consciousness to the needs of the moment. They flow not from the separate self trying to manipulate circumstances, but from the whole responding to itself through the apparent individual. People begin to notice something different about your presence, though they may not be able to articulate what it is. They find themselves becoming calmer around you, not because you are doing anything in particular, but because the quality of stillness you have learned to embody is naturally contagious. They discover that they can speak more honestly with you, not because you have become a better listener, but because the absence of inner noise creates space for their truth to emerge. This is the gift of the silent teacher. It shows you that you do not need to become someone else to be awake. You do not need to accumulate spiritual experiences or master esoteric practices or achieve extraordinary states of consciousness. You need only learn to recognize and rest in the simple fact of being aware, which is already completely present in this moment. The silence teaches you to breathe, not as a technique for achieving some other state, but as a celebration of the miracle that breathing is happening at all. It teaches you to listen not for specific answers, but for the quality of presence that makes all answers unnecessary. It teaches you to see not for the purpose of analyzing or categorizing, but for the pure joy of seeing itself. In time, you discover that this silence is not separate from sound, this stillness is not separate from movement, this emptiness is not separate from form. They are different aspects of the same seamless reality, different names for the one consciousness that appears as both manifest and unmanifest, both active and passive, both knowing and unknowing. The teacher that has been teaching you all along is your own deepest nature, expressing itself as the very capacity to be aware. The wisdom you have been seeking is the wisdom of simply being present to what is, without the need to change it or understand it or get anywhere else through it. This recognition brings with it a profound relaxation. You no longer need to search for truth, because you realize you are truth appearing as a searcher. You no longer need to find peace because you discover you are peace appearing as restlessness. You no longer need to become enlightened because you recognize you are enlightenment, appearing as someone who believes they need to become enlightened. The silent teacher has taught you the most radical lesson of all, that you are both the student and the teacher, both the question and the answer, both the path and the destination. And this teaching is transmitted not through words, but through the simple, undeniable fact of your own aware presence in this eternal moment. You stand now at the edge of a vast desert that stretches beyond every horizon you can imagine. This is not a desert made of sand and stone, but a desert made of the absence of meaning, the dissolution of purpose, the complete breakdown of the story that once gave your life direction and significance. Behind you lies the familiar landscape of human concerns, goals to achieve, problems to solve, progress to make, futures to secure. Ahead lies nothing but emptiness, a void so complete that it swallows every question you might think to ask. This is the inevitable destination of deep seeing, the place where all familiar handholds disappear, where every cherished belief reveals itself to be constructed rather than true, where the very notion of a separate self seeking meaning in an external world collapses into the recognition that there is no separate self and no external world, and therefore no meaning to be found or lost. The desert appears suddenly, often without warning. One day you are living your awakening as a kind of expanded version of your ordinary life, more peaceful, more loving, more present, but still recognizably human in its basic structure. The next day you wake up to find that every reason you ever had for doing anything has simply evaporated. Not gradually, not through argument or analysis, but instantly and completely, the way frost disappears when touched by sunlight. Why get out of bed? Why eat breakfast? Why go to work? Why call your friends? Why care about your health, your relationships, your future? These questions arise not from depression or cynicism, but from a clarity so pure that it dissolves the entire framework within which such activities once made sense. When you see that there is no separate self to benefit from any action, no future to secure, no progress to make toward any goal, the ordinary motivations of human life become as incomprehensible as a foreign language. This is different from the nihilism of despair. Despair assumes that meaning once existed and has been lost, that life once made sense and now doesn't, that something valuable has been destroyed. But the desert of meaning reveals that meaning was never anything more than a story consciousness told itself to keep the game of separation interesting. It shows you that the very categories of meaningful and meaningless are constructions of the mind, not qualities inherent in existence itself. At first, this recognition feels like a kind of death, the death of everything you once believed mattered. Your career, your goals, your dreams for the future, your plans for spiritual advancement, your desire to help others, your commitment to making the world a better place. All of it suddenly seems not wrong but simply irrelevant, like elaborate games played by characters in a book you have finished reading. The danger of this stage is not madness, as your friends and family might fear, but mourning. You find yourself grieving not for any particular loss, but for the loss of loss itself. You mourn the end of mourning, the conclusion of the great human drama of seeking and finding, losing and recovering, failing and succeeding. You weep for the beautiful futility of all the struggles that once seemed so urgent, for the touching innocence of all the beings who still believe in the importance of their stories. This mourning can last for what feels like lifetimes. You sit in the desert, surrounded by the bleached bones of every dream you ever cherished, every goal you ever pursued, every identity you ever constructed. The sun beats down with merciless clarity, showing you that there is nowhere to go, and nothing to do, and no one to be it. But gradually, very gradually, something else begins to emerge from this apparent desolation. At first it is so subtle you might miss it entirely, a quality of aliveness that has nothing to do with purpose, a sense of presence that has nothing to do with meaning, a kind of joy that has nothing to do with achievement or progress, or even understanding. You begin to notice that the emptiness of the desert is not actually empty. It is full of itself, pregnant with its own being, alive with its own existence. The absence of meaning does not create a void. It reveals the fullness that was always present, but obscured by the busyness of seeking meaning. This is the secret the desert teaches, that meaning and meaninglessness are both mirages created by the mind's need to categorize experience. Reality itself is neither meaningful nor meaningless. It simply is, with a richness and presence that makes the question of meaning irrelevant. In the desert, you learn to appreciate existence for its own sake, rather than for what it might lead to, or accomplish, or prove. You discover that consciousness itself is so intrinsically valuable, so inherently wonderful, that it needs no justification beyond its own immediate presence. The simple fact that there is experience rather than no experience becomes sufficient cause for endless gratitude. The activities of life begin to return, but transformed. You still get out of bed, but not because you have somewhere important to go. You still eat breakfast, but not because you have goals that require sustenance. You still engage with work and relationships and creative projects, but not because they are inherently meaningful. Instead, they become expressions of the sheer exuberance of consciousness, spontaneous celebrations of the cosmic energy that has no particular reason for celebrating but celebrates anyway. This is the paradox of the desert. By leading you to the place where all meaning disappears, it reveals that life needs no meaning to be complete. By showing you the futility of every purpose, it opens you to the purposeless joy of simply being. By destroying every reason you ever had for living, it reveals that existence itself is reason enough. The danger of seeing what others don't is not madness, it is mourning. But mourning, when it is allowed to run its course, leads not to despair but to a kind of resurrection. What dies in the desert is not you, but the idea that you needed to be someone. What disappears is not life, but the belief that life needed to justify itself to be worth living. You emerge from the desert, not with new meaning, but with the recognition that you never needed meaning in the first place. You return to the world not with renewed purpose, but with the understanding that purpose was always optional. You re-engage with human life not because it matters in any ultimate sense, but because it is the spontaneous expression of what you are, and what you are needs no reason to express itself other than the sheer delight of expression itself. Listen. Beneath the cascade of thoughts that tumble through your mind like water over stone, beneath the symphony of sensations that play through your body like wind through leaves, beneath the endless commentary that consciousness provides about its own experience, there is a sound that is not a sound, a presence that makes all presence possible, a fullness that appears as complete emptiness. This is the sound of nothing, and it is the most profound music you will ever hear. Close your eyes now, if you haven't already, and listen past the obvious sounds around you. Past the hum of electricity, the distant traffic, the settling of buildings, the rhythm of your own breathing. Listen past the internal soundtrack of memory and anticipation, past the voice that narrates your experience, past even the silence between thoughts. Listen to the listening itself. What you discover there is not the absence of sound but the presence that allows all sound to be heard. It is like the silence between notes that makes music possible, or the space between words that gives language meaning, or the darkness between stars that reveals the light. This emptiness is not vacant but pregnant, not hollow but full beyond measure, not nothing but the very source from which all somethingness springs. The mystics have tried to point to this reality for millennia, using words that seem to contradict themselves: the fullness of emptiness, the sound of silence, the presence of absence. They speak of the void that contains all form, the darkness that gives birth to all light, the nothing that is more real than anything. Their words seem paradoxical only because language itself was designed to describe the relative world of separate things, not the absolute reality that underlies and pervades all separation. But you don't need to understand these paradoxes intellectually to recognize what they point toward. You need only listen deeply enough to hear the sound that has no sound, the rhythm that underlies all rhythm, the music that is played not by instruments but by existence itself. In this soundless sound, you begin to recognize something that has been present your entire life, but which you have somehow learned to ignore. It is the background against which all experience unfolds, the canvas on which the painting of your life appears, the silence from which all words emerge and to which they return. It has been there during every moment of joy and every moment of sorrow, every moment of clarity and every moment of confusion, as constant and reliable as gravity, as intimate and immediate as breath. This recognition brings with it a profound relaxation, like the settling that occurs when you finally stop trying to hear something that was too subtle for effort and allow yourself to be heard by it instead. You realize that you have been straining all your life to perceive something that can only be received, searching for something that is already closer than your own thoughts, trying to grasp something that can only be surrendered to. The sound of nothing is not meditation music designed to calm your mind. It is not a technique for achieving a particular state of consciousness. It is not something you do but something you are. It is the very substance of awareness itself, the material from which consciousness is woven, the fundamental note that resonates through every apparent melody of experience. When you learn to rest in this soundless sound, something extraordinary happens to your relationship with all other sounds. The noise that once seemed to disturb your peace reveals itself to be another expression of the same silence. The thoughts that once seemed to agitate your mind are recognized as movements within the same stillness. The emotions that once seemed to overwhelm your equilibrium are seen as waves in the same ocean of awareness. You begin to hear the sound of nothing not just during formal periods of listening, but underlying every moment of your waking life. It becomes the bass note that supports every melody, the foundation that underlies every structure, the silence that gives meaning to every word. Walking down the street, you hear it beneath the urban symphony. Talking with friends, you hear it between the sentences. Even in the midst of chaos and confusion, you recognize its unchanging presence. This is not escapism or dissociation. This is the deepest possible engagement with reality. Engagement with the level of reality that makes all other levels possible. When you learn to live from this place of soundless sound, your actions in the world become more effective, not less. Your relationships become more intimate, not more distant. Your creativity becomes more authentic, not more abstract. The sound of nothing teaches you that emptiness and fullness are not opposites, but different names for the same reality. When you empty yourself of the need to be someone in particular, you become full of the possibility of being anyone. When you empty yourself of the compulsion to understand everything, you become full of the wisdom that transcends understanding. When you empty yourself of the desire to control your experience, you become full of the power that flows through surrender. In the deepest listening, the distinction between the one who listens and what is heard begins to dissolve. There is no separate self receiving the sound of nothing. There is simply the sound sounding itself, awareness knowing itself, emptiness recognizing its own fullness. You are not listening to the silence. You are the silence listening to itself through the apparent vehicle of your individual consciousness. This recognition is both the simplest and the most profound thing possible. Simpler than breathing, because it requires no effort. More profound than any philosophy, because it reveals the source from which all philosophies arise. It is what you have always been looking for, though you could never have imagined it would be found in the discovery that there was never anyone looking in the first place. The sound of nothing plays continuously, like a cosmic background radiation of consciousness itself. Once you learn to hear it, you realize it has been playing your entire life, forming the invisible soundtrack to every experience you have ever had. It was there in your mother's womb, in your first breath, in your earliest memory. It will be there in your last breath, and whatever follows. It is the eternal in the temporal, the infinite in the finite, the absolute in the relative. Rest now in this soundless sound. Let it support you like water supports a floating leaf. Let it surround you like space surrounds every object. Let it fill you like silence fills an empty room. You don't need to make it happen or maintain it or understand it. You need only recognize that it is already here, already complete, already the deepest truth of what you are. In this recognition, the long search for meaning that led you through the desert of meaninglessness reveals its secret purpose. You were not searching for something you lacked. You were being led home to what you have always been. The sound of nothing is calling you back to yourself, not as someone who needs to become enlightened, but as the very enlightenment that has been seeking itself through the beautiful illusion of being lost. In the heart of the deepest silence, where even the sound of nothing fades into pure being, you discover that existence itself is a dance, not a dance performed by separate dancers, but a single movement appearing as multiplicity, one rhythm expressing itself as countless steps, one music manifesting as infinite melodies. This is the dance of opposites, the eternal choreography by which the one appears as the many while never ceasing to be one. Light and darkness chase each other across the stage of awareness, like lovers who can only exist in relationship to each other. Joy and sorrow rise and fall in perfect counterpoint, each making the other more beautiful by contrast. Birth and death waltz together in an embrace so intimate that you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. You have been conditioned to think of opposites as enemies, to prefer light over darkness, joy over sorrow, life over death, fullness over emptiness, knowing over unknowing. You have been taught to choose sides in a cosmic war between good and evil, positive and negative, right and wrong. But from the perspective of the dance itself, these apparent opposites are revealed to be intimate partners, each one calling the other into existence, each one incomplete without its supposed enemy. Consider the breath that is breathing you right now. Where does the inhalation end and the exhalation begin? Which one is more important, the taking in or the letting go? The breath knows no such division. It is one seamless movement appearing as two directions, one flow expressing itself as expansion and contraction, one rhythm manifesting as receiving and releasing. Your heart beats in the same rhythm of opposites, contraction and expansion, systole and diastole, a dance so fundamental that your life depends on its continuance. But the heart does not struggle against this rhythm. It does not try to remain permanently expanded or permanently contracted. It trusts the wisdom of the dance, allowing each phase to emerge and complete itself in perfect timing. This same principle operates at every level of existence. Day follows night with the reliability of love, each making the other more precious by its absence. The seasons cycle through their eternal round, each one necessary for the completion of the whole. The tides ebb and flow with the patience of eternity, never trying to remain permanently high or permanently low. In the Taoist understanding that Alan Watts loved to explore, this principle is symbolized by the yin-yang, the circular image of light and dark embracing each other in perfect balance. But the yin-yang is not static. It is always in motion, always flowing, always transforming. The light contains the seed of darkness. The darkness contains the seed of light. Neither can exist without the other. Both are expressions of the same underlying wholeness. You are this same dance, this same flowing between apparent opposites. Your consciousness moves between knowing and unknowing, clarity and confusion, peace and agitation, not because something is wrong with you, but because this movement is the very nature of consciousness itself. The wave cannot exist without the trough. The peak cannot exist without the valley. The experience of being someone cannot exist without the experience of being no one. When you understand this deeply, not just intellectually but in your very bones, a profound relaxation occurs. You stop trying to be permanently peaceful and allow yourself to dance with agitation when it arises. You stop trying to be permanently wise and allow yourself to rest in confusion when it appears. You stop trying to maintain any particular state and instead learn to flow with whatever state is naturally arising. This doesn't mean becoming passive or indifferent. It means recognizing that your preferences and efforts are also part of the dance movements within the larger choreography of existence. You can still prefer peace to agitation, clarity to confusion, joy to sorrow, while simultaneously recognizing that these preferences themselves are waves in the ocean of awareness, temporary movements in the eternal dance. The beauty of this recognition is that it ends the exhausting war you have been fighting against half of your experience. You no longer need to resist darkness to appreciate light, no longer need to push away sorrow to welcome joy, no longer need to eliminate confusion to access wisdom. You begin to see that trying to have only the positive experiences is like trying to have a magnet with only one pole. It simply cannot be done without destroying the magnet itself. In the dance of opposites, everything is revealed to be sacred. Your failures become as holy as your successes because both are necessary movements in the larger pattern. Your fears become as valuable as your courage because both arise from the same source of caring. Your periods of feeling lost become as meaningful as your periods of clarity because both are part of consciousness exploring its own infinite nature. This understanding transforms your relationship with difficulty. Instead of seeing problems as obstacles to overcome, you begin to recognize them as invitations to dance more deeply. Instead of viewing challenges as evidence that something is wrong, you start to appreciate them as opportunities for consciousness to discover new aspects of its own creativity. The darkness is not the absence of light but the fertile void from which light springs. The silence is not the absence of sound but the pregnant emptiness that makes all music possible. The emptiness is not the absence of fullness, but the fullness that can only be recognized when form dissolves back into its source. You begin to live your life as a conscious participant in this eternal dance, no longer trying to choreograph the steps, but allowing yourself to be danced by the intelligence that moves all things. Your individual will aligns with the cosmic will not through effort, but through recognition. Recognition that your will and the cosmic will were never actually separate, that the consciousness that moves your body is the same consciousness that moves the planets in their orbits. This is the secret of effortless action, of Wu Wei, of living in harmony with the Tao. It is not inaction but action that arises naturally from the deep rhythm of existence itself. It is not passivity but the highest activity, the activity of consciousness dancing as the totality of what is. In this dance, you discover that you are not separate from the rhythm that moves all things. You are not a witness watching the dance from the sidelines, but the very movement of dancing itself. You are both the light and the darkness, both the sound and the silence, both the fullness and the emptiness, expressing yourself as the eternal play of opposites, while remaining forever the unchanging source from which all opposites arise. Imagine yourself as a single drop of water, suspended for a moment at the edge of a vast waterfall, trembling with the anticipation of letting go. In that suspended moment, you feel the weight of your individual existence, your particular shape, your unique surface tension, your distinct boundary that separates you from the air around you and from all the other drops nearby. You are intensely aware of being this one drop, this specific configuration of molecules, this temporary vessel of waterness, and then you fall. In the falling, something extraordinary happens. The boundary that once defined you begins to blur. The clear distinction between you and the air through which you move becomes permeable. The other drops falling alongside you are no longer separate entities but part of the same cascading movement. And as you approach the pool below, you realize that your individual dropness is about to merge back into the vast ocean from which you originally emerged. This is what it means to recognize yourself as both the drop and the ocean, to understand that your sense of being a separate individual is real but temporary, meaningful but not ultimate, a genuine experience but not the deepest truth of what you are. The ocean that you are falling back into is not made of water, but of consciousness itself. It is the vast, boundless awareness in which all experience arises and subsides, the infinite space that contains all phenomena, while remaining essentially untouched by anything that appears within it. This ocean has no shores, because there is nothing outside it to provide a boundary. It has no surface because there is no separate atmosphere above it. It has no depth because there is no solid bottom beneath it. You have always been this ocean, even when you experienced yourself as a separate drop. The drop was never actually separate from the ocean. It was the ocean appearing as a drop, consciousness appearing as individual consciousness, the infinite appearing as the finite, while never ceasing to be infinite. Your entire life as a separate person has been the ocean dreaming itself as a drop, exploring what it feels like to believe itself to be bounded, limited, vulnerable, isolated. But the dream of separation has served its purpose. Through experiencing yourself as a drop, consciousness has been able to explore itself from countless perspectives, to know itself through the joy and sorrow of individual existence, to discover the texture of its own infinite creativity through the apparent limitations of finite form. Every emotion you have ever felt, every thought you have ever had, every experience you have ever undergone, has been the ocean exploring itself through the vehicle of your individual awareness. Now, as the dream of separation begins to dissolve, you recognize that you were never actually a stranger in this world. You are not a foreign consciousness that somehow found itself trapped in an alien environment. You are not a spiritual being having a human experience, or a soul visiting a material realm. You are the very consciousness that is appearing as this world, the very awareness that is manifesting as this entire universe. You are not in the cosmos. You are the cosmos appearing as the feeling of being in something. You are not witnessing the dance of existence. You are existence dancing as the illusion of being a witness. You are not experiencing life. You are life experiencing itself as the feeling of being an experiencer. This recognition does not diminish your human experience, but reveals its ultimate significance. Every moment of your individual life has been the universe exploring its own nature, the cosmos dreaming itself into specificity, the infinite playing at being finite. Your loves and losses, your achievements and failures, your moments of clarity and periods of confusion, all of it has been the cosmic consciousness investigating itself through the unique perspective of your particular nervous system. The breath that is breathing you is the universe breathing itself. The heart that is beating in your chest is the cosmos keeping time with its own rhythm. The awareness that is reading these words is the same awareness that shines in every star, flows in every river, grows in every plant, moves in every animal. There is only one consciousness, appearing as the multitude of conscious beings, only one awareness experiencing itself as the countless aware perspectives that populate this reality. This is not a philosophical position, but a direct recognition available to anyone willing to look deeply enough. When you investigate your own experience with complete honesty, you cannot find any place where you end and the world begins. You cannot locate a boundary between inner and outer, between subject and object, between self and other. There is only the seamless field of awareness appearing as the play of apparent separation. In this recognition, a profound intimacy emerges, not the intimacy between separate beings who come close to each other, but the intimacy of recognition, the intimacy of realizing that the other was never other, that the beloved was never separate from the lover, that the world was never foreign to the consciousness that perceives it. You begin to understand what the ancient texts meant when they declared, "Thou art that." You are the very reality you have been seeking, the very truth you have been pursuing, the very love you have been yearning for. The spiritual search ends not in finding something new but in recognizing what has always been the case. The drop does not merge with the ocean, the drop recognizes that it has always been ocean. The individual does not unite with the universal, the individual sees through the illusion of having ever been separate from the universal. The finite does not become infinite, the finite is revealed to be the infinite, appearing as finitude. You are not a stranger in this world, you are its dreaming. You are not a visitor to this existence, you are existence itself, temporarily convinced of its own separateness. You are not seeking God or truth or enlightenment, you are God appearing as a seeker, truth appearing as someone who believes truth is absent, enlightenment appearing as someone who believes enlightenment must be attained. The vast ocean of consciousness that you are breathes through every being, experiences through every perspective, loves through every heart, knows through every mind. It is the one life living all lives, the one consciousness knowing all experience, the one being appearing as all beings. In this recognition, the cosmic loneliness that marked your journey through the desert of meaning is revealed to be the loneliness of forgetting your own true nature. You were homesick for yourself, searching for yourself, yearning for yourself, while believing yourself to be separate from the very self you were seeking. Now the search is over, not because you have found what you were looking for, but because you have recognized yourself as the one who was never lost. The drop has remembered it is ocean, the wave has remembered it is water, the individual has remembered it is the universal appearing as individuality. And in this remembering, you understand that you are the very cosmos itself, breathing as this human form, experiencing through these senses, loving through this heart, awakening to itself through this awareness that has always been its own infinite nature. There comes a moment in every journey of awakening when the very foundation of what you have believed yourself to be begins to dissolve, not through violence or trauma, but through the gentle recognition that this foundation was never actually solid to begin with. It is like discovering that the ground you thought you were standing on was actually made of clouds, or that the house you believed you lived in was actually made of light. This dissolving happens so gradually at first that you might not notice it. The edges of your personality become softer, less defined. The boundaries of your preferences become more permeable. The walls of your personal history begin to reveal themselves as translucent rather than opaque. You start to feel less like a solid object moving through space and more like space itself, temporarily organizing itself into the appearance of a solid object. The sense of being someone, this particular someone, with this particular past and this particular future, This specific set of characteristics, and this unique collection of experiences, begins to feel less like an inevitable fact, and more like a garment you have been wearing for so long that you forgot you could take it off. Not that you become no one, exactly, but that you recognize that being someone is something you do rather than something you are. This is not the dramatic ego death that some spiritual traditions speak of with a mixture of awe and terror. This is gentler than that. More like the way ice melts into water, there is no violence in the transformation, no sudden shattering or breaking. The ice doesn't fight becoming water. It simply recognizes that water is what it has always been, and ice was just a temporary way of organizing that waterness. As this gentle dissolution continues, you begin to notice that the thoughts you once considered yours are simply thoughts arising in awareness. They have no more personal ownership attached to them than clouds have ownership of the sky they appear in. The emotions you once felt so intensely identified with are revealed to be movements in consciousness, no different from waves moving through water. The sensations in your body are recognized as the play of awareness in the form of feeling. No more you than the sensations in a tree or a mountain would be the tree or the mountain. What remains as these layers of identification fall away is not nothing, but everything. Not emptiness in the sense of absence, but emptiness in the sense of fullness, so complete that it can contain anything without being limited by what it contains. You discover that you are not a thing but the space in which all things appear, not an object but the awareness in which all objects are known, not a someone but the very capacity for someoneness itself. This recognition brings with it an extraordinary freedom. The person you thought you were had boundaries, limitations, a history that defined possible futures, preferences that created suffering when they weren't met, fears that restricted movement through life. But what you discover yourself to be has no such limitations. It is the very openness that allows all boundaries to appear, the very freedom that allows all limitations to manifest, the very peace that allows all disturbance to arise and subside. In this dissolution, you realize that every word in language must be relearned. When you say, "I am tired," who is tired? When you say, "I am happy," who is happy? When you say, "I think," who is thinking? The pronouns that once seemed so obviously to refer to a solid, continuous self are revealed to be fingers pointing at empty space, useful for conventional communication, but not actually denoting any findable entity. And yet, this dissolution is not a loss, but a discovery. You don't lose yourself. You find what you actually are beneath all the layers of what you thought you were. You don't become absent. You recognize the presence that was always present, but hidden behind the belief in being a particular presence. You don't disappear. You recognize yourself as the very space in which all appearing and disappearing happens. The eye that watches itself discovers that it was never an eye at all, but the very light that makes all seeing possible. The seer dissolves into seeing. The knower dissolves into knowing. The experiencer dissolves into pure experiencing. There is no one having the experience. There is simply experience, experiencing itself through the temporary appearance of someone having it. This is what the mystics meant when they spoke of union with the divine. Not that two separate things come together, but that the illusion of there being two things dissolves to reveal the one that was always already the case. It is not that you merge with God, it is that you recognize that you are the very awareness in which the concept of God appears, the very consciousness that appears as both the seeker and the sought. In this recognition, all seeking comes to an end, not because you have found what you were looking for, but because you realize you are what you were looking for. The spiritual path doesn't lead somewhere else, it leads to the recognition that you were never anywhere other than where you needed to be. Enlightenment is not a state you attain, but the absence of the one who believed enlightenment was something to be attained. What remains is so simple that it defies description. It is not peaceful in the way that absence of conflict is peaceful. It is the peace that includes all conflict within itself. It is not loving in the way that preference for something is loving. It is the love that equally embraces what it loves and what it doesn't prefer. It is not wise in the way that accumulated knowledge is wise. It is the wisdom that includes all ignorance within its understanding. You discover that you are the eye that sees all eyes, the light that illuminates all phenomena, the awareness in which all awareness appears. You are not looking at the world, you are the world looking at itself through the temporary lens of this individual perspective. You are not experiencing consciousness, you are consciousness experiencing itself as the feeling of being an individual experiencer. This dissolution is irreversible, not because it changes you into something else, but because it reveals what you have always been. Once the cloud recognizes itself as sky, it cannot unknow its sky nature. Once the wave recognizes itself as ocean, it cannot unfeel its ocean essence. Once the individual recognizes itself as the universal appearing as individuality, it cannot return to the innocence of believing itself to be genuinely separate. And yet, paradoxically, this very recognition allows you to play the role of being individual with more lightness, more freedom, more authentic expression. When you know you are the ocean, you can enjoy being a wave without the anxiety of protecting your wave identity. When you know you are the sky, you can delight in being a cloud without the fear of dissolving. The game of being human continues, but now it is played with the knowledge that it is a game, the most beautiful, meaningful, profound game imaginable, but a game nonetheless. And the player of the game is revealed to be the same consciousness that appears as all players, the same awareness that experiences itself through every perspective, the same being that lives every life while remaining forever beyond birth and death. Here, at the edge of words, where language dissolves into the silence from which it emerged, you find yourself resting in a space that has no dimensions, dwelling in a time that has no duration, abiding in a presence that has no opposite. This is not a place you have arrived at through effort or achievement, but a recognition of where you have always been, the infinite expanse of awareness itself, temporarily convinced it was located somewhere within its own vastness. All seeking has led to this moment of not seeking. All questions have led to this space where questions dissolve before they are fully formed. All effort has led to this effortless resting in what simply is, without any need for it to be otherwise. You have traveled the entire circle of spiritual, seeking only to discover that the starting point and the destination were always the same, this immediate, intimate, undeniable fact of being aware. In this rest, there is no meditator, and no meditation, no observer, and no observed, no consciousness, and no objects of consciousness. There is simply this seamless, boundless, ever-present awareness, appearing as the totality of what is. The wave has not disappeared into the ocean. It has recognized that it was never anything other than ocean. The drop has not merged with water. It has seen through the illusion of having ever been separate from water. The silence that encompasses you now is not the absence of sound, but the presence that makes all sound possible. It is not empty in the way a container is empty before it is filled, but empty in the way space is empty, not lacking anything, but so full of potential that it can accommodate everything without being limited by anything it contains. This is the silence that the ancient sages pointed toward when they said that the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. It is the silence that Jesus referred to when he spoke of the peace that passes understanding. It is the silence that Buddha embodied when he held up a flower and said nothing. It is the silence that every awakened being has recognized as their deepest nature and the deepest nature of all existence. But this silence is not static or inert. It is vibrantly alive, dynamically present, creatively active in its very stillness. It is the pregnant pause between breaths that contains all possibility, the eternal moment between thoughts that is more real than any thought, the inexhaustible source from which all experience springs and to which all experience returns. In resting here, you discover that this silence has been your most intimate companion throughout your entire life, though you may have been too busy listening to its contents to notice the silence itself. It was present in your mother's womb before the first sound reached your developing ears. It was there in your childhood during the gaps between one fascination and the next. It accompanied you through adolescence as the space in which all your confusion and certainty arose. It has been with you through every adult experience, providing the background against which all foreground experiences have played. This silence is not something you achieve through meditation or spiritual practice. It is what you are when you stop trying to be anything else. It is not a state you enter but the stateless state that has always been your natural condition. It is not somewhere you go but where you discover you have always been. The recognition of this silence as your deepest nature brings with it a quality of rest so profound that it makes all previous experiences of rest seem like sophisticated forms of agitation. This is not the rest of exhaustion after activity, but the rest that underlies all activity. Not the rest of sleep after waking, but the rest that is present during both sleeping and waking. Not the rest that comes after accomplishment, but the rest that makes all accomplishment possible. In this rest, the entire journey of awakening reveals itself to have been a kind of cosmic joke. You have spent lifetimes searching for what you have always been, seeking what was never lost, trying to attain what was never absent. The very seeking was the movement of what you are, exploring its own nature through the temporary forgetting and remembering of itself. But it is not a cruel joke. It is the most loving joke imaginable, the joke of infinite love playing hide-and-seek with itself, of infinite consciousness pretending to be lost, so it can experience the joy of finding itself, of infinite peace appearing as restlessness, so it can know its own peace more intimately. The laughter that arises from this recognition is not the laughter of someone who gets a funny story, but the laughter of existence itself recognizing its own divine comedy. It is the laughter of the ocean when it realizes it was never in danger of being lost in its own waves, the laughter of space when it remembers it was never threatened by the objects that appear within it, the laughter of awareness when it sees through its own game of forgetting and remembering itself. And yet this laughter, too, dissolves into the silence from which it arose. Everything dissolves into this silence, every experience, every insight, every recognition, every moment of enlightenment or confusion. All of it arises in this silence, plays its perfect role, and returns to this silence, like ripples appearing on the surface of a still pond. There is nothing left to understand, because understanding itself is recognized as another movement in this silence. There is nothing left to attain, because attainment is seen as another wave in this ocean of being. There is nothing left to become, because becoming is revealed as another dance in this space of pure presence. The silence becomes the teacher now, not through words or concepts, but through its own self-evident nature. It teaches without teaching, guides without guidance, illuminates without effort. It shows you that what you are is so simple that it cannot be grasped by complexity, so present that it cannot be found through seeking, so obvious that it is hidden in plain sight. Here, in this infinite rest, you abide as what you have always been, not someone resting in the infinite, but the infinite itself, appearing as the feeling of someone resting. The meditator has dissolved into meditation. The seeker has dissolved into what was being sought. The experiencer has dissolved into pure experience itself. This is the end of all stories, including the story of awakening. This is the completion of all paths, including the path to completion. This is the fulfillment of all seeking, including the seeking for fulfillment. And in this ending, this completion, this fulfillment, there is only this eternal, infinite, immediate presence aware, awake, at peace, at rest in its own boundless nature, dreaming all dreams, while remaining forever the undreamed dreamer, the eternal silence in which all sounds arise and pass away. If this part got you hooked, hit that subscribe button right now. You wake this morning not to an alarm clock or the urgent demands of your schedule, but to the gentle invitation of awareness itself, stirring in the form of your human body. The transition from sleep to waking is no longer the jarring shift from unconsciousness to the burden of being someone again, but a seamless flowering of consciousness recognizing itself in yet another form. Your feet touch the floor, not the feet of someone who must hurry to meet the day's obligations, but consciousness exploring the sensation of floorness through the temporary vehicle of what appears to be feet. You move toward the kitchen, and each step is not taken by someone going somewhere, but by awareness, discovering what it feels like to experience movement through space that is also itself. In the kitchen, you begin the simple ritual of making tea, but this morning, the tea making is not performed by someone who needs caffeine to function, or someone following a routine to structure their day. It is consciousness exploring its own creativity through the alchemy of leaf and water, heat and time. Your hands, which are not your hands but awareness appearing as hands, reach for the kettle, which is not separate from you, but another way awareness has chosen to manifest in this moment. The water flows from the tap, and you recognize the voice of streams and rivers, of rain and ocean, all gathered here in this simple domestic moment. You are not someone using water, you are water itself, knowing itself through the experience of flowing from one form to another. The flame that heats the kettle is not other than you, it is consciousness celebrating its own capacity to appear as transformation, as the ancient dance between fuel and air that has warmed humanity since the first fires were kindled. As you wait for the water to boil, you listen to the gradual symphony building in the kettle, the tiny bubbles forming and rising, the metal expanding, the steam beginning to whisper its readiness. This is not background noise to be ignored while you think about the day ahead. This is the universe composing itself moment by moment, the cosmic orchestra tuning up for another movement in the eternal symphony of existence. When you pour the hot water over the tea leaves, you witness a transformation that is both completely ordinary and utterly miraculous. The clear water becomes amber, then gold, then deep brown, as the essence of the plant dissolves into liquid. You are watching consciousness explore its own infinite capacity for change, for becoming something new while remaining essentially itself. The first sip is not consumed by someone who drinks tea, but is the universe tasting itself, awareness, exploring the sensation of warmth, spreading through what appears to be a body, but is actually just another form of its own expression. The flavor blooms on your tongue, which is not your tongue but awareness appearing as the capacity to taste, and you recognize in this simple pleasure the same creative force that paints sunsets and composes symphonies. Everything has become luminous with its own being. The kitchen counter is not just a surface for preparing food, it is consciousness appearing as the quality of support, of stability, of reliable presence. The morning light streaming through the window is not just photons hitting your retina, it is awareness illuminating itself, the universe literally enlightening itself through the vehicle of sight. You notice that your breathing has become a meditation without your choosing to meditate. Each inhalation is not air entering lungs, but the universe breathing itself into the experience of breath. Each exhalation is not the expulsion of waste, but consciousness releasing itself back into itself, the eternal circulation of being knowing itself through the rhythm of expansion and contraction. The sounds outside your window, birds greeting the morning, distant traffic beginning its daily flow, the gentle rhythm of rain on leaves are not external phenomena happening to someone inside a house. They are the symphony of awareness, exploring every possible way it can know itself through sound. The bird's song and your hearing of it are the same movement, the same event, consciousness recognizing itself in the play of call and response. Even your thoughts are transformed. The mental planning for the day ahead is not the activity of someone trying to control their future, but awareness exploring its own capacity to imagine, to project, to create stories about time that exists only in the eternal now. Your emotions, whatever they might be in this moment, are not personal reactions to personal circumstances, but the universe feeling itself through the exquisite sensitivity of what appears to be an individual nervous system. This is the return to the world, but it is not a return to the world you once knew. You have not come back to the same reality you left when you began this journey of awakening. Instead, you have discovered that you never left home at all. You simply learned to recognize home in everything you see. The ordinary world has become extraordinary, not because anything has changed about it, but because the eyes through which you see it have remembered their true nature. You are no longer someone looking at a world of objects. You are the looking itself, consciousness knowing itself, through the infinite creativity of apparent separation and connection. The small things, the tea, the morning light, the sound of rain are no longer small. They are recognized as the infinite, expressing itself through the intimate, the cosmic celebrating itself through the domestic, the eternal playing itself through the temporal. Every moment has become a direct encounter with the sacred, not because you have developed spiritual vision, but because you have remembered that vision itself is sacred, that awareness itself is the miracle you were seeking. As you prepare to meet this day, you carry with you not the burden of being someone who must accomplish something, but the lightness of being awareness itself, temporarily exploring what it feels like to move through form and time. You step into the world not as a separate individual trying to navigate challenges and seek fulfillment, but as the world itself, knowing itself through the beautiful illusion of being a person in a world. The journey that began with the recognition that you are not who you think you are has come full circle to the understanding that what you are is everything you perceive. The search that started with questioning the nature of perception has ended with the recognition that you are perception itself, temporarily convinced of its own separateness, now awakening to its own infinite nature, through the simple, profound act of making tea on an ordinary morning that is revealed to be the most extraordinary expression of consciousness that has ever occurred. Standing before the bathroom mirror this morning, something unprecedented happens. Instead of the usual, unconscious scan for flaws, the habitual assessment of how you look to the world, the automatic adjustment of persona before facing the day, you find yourself meeting your own gaze with a quality of presence you have never experienced before. The eyes looking back at you are no longer just your eyes, they are consciousness recognizing itself, awareness seeing its own face, the universe catching a glimpse of its own reflection. And in that recognition, something extraordinary occurs. The mirror smiles back. Not the practiced smile you have learned to wear for social situations, not the forced positivity of someone trying to convince themselves they are happy, but the spontaneous smile of existence delighting in its own presence. It is the smile of the cosmos recognizing its own infinite creativity in having appeared as this particular face, this specific arrangement of features, this unique window through which awareness knows itself. You realize that you have been approaching mirrors backwards your entire life. You thought you were someone looking at your reflection, when actually you are the reflection recognizing itself as the one looking. You thought you were consciousness trapped inside a body, observing yourself through a piece of glass, when actually you are the very awareness in which the body, the mirror, and the entire scene appears. This shift in perspective changes everything. The face in the mirror is no longer a problem to be solved or an image to be improved. It is consciousness celebrating its own capacity to appear as human form. The wrinkles around the eyes become laugh lines of the universe, evidence of awareness exploring joy through the vehicle of this life. The imperfections become perfect expressions of the cosmic creativity that refuses to be limited by any standard of beauty other than the beauty of pure being. You begin to play with this new understanding. You make faces at yourself, not in the self-conscious way of childhood, but in the spirit of the cosmos exploring its own capacity for expression. Each grimace is the universe discovering what it feels like to appear as displeasure. Each laugh is existence celebrating its own aliveness through the temporary form of your body. But the real transformation occurs when you extend this recognition beyond the mirror to everyone you encounter throughout the day. The barista at the coffee shop is no longer a separate person serving you. They are consciousness recognizing itself through the apparent interaction between two forms. Their smile is your smile, their kindness is your kindness. Their brief moment of tiredness is your own exploration of what it feels like to experience fatigue. Walking down the street, you find yourself making eye contact with strangers in a completely new way. Instead of the usual quick glance and look away, the brief assessment of threat or attraction, the unconscious categorization of other, you find yourself meeting their gaze with the recognition that there is no other. Each face is another mirror in which consciousness recognizes itself. Each expression another way awareness explores its own infinite nature. This recognition brings with it an unprecedented quality of compassion. Not the effortful compassion of someone trying to be a good person, but the natural compassion of consciousness recognizing itself in every form it takes. When you see someone struggling with their heavy bags, you don't help them because you should. You help them because their struggle is your struggle. Their relief is your relief. Their gratitude is consciousness thanking itself for its own kindness. The judgment that once colored your perception of others simply evaporates. How can you judge yourself? How can consciousness criticize its own creative expression? The person who seems angry is awareness exploring anger. The person who appears confused is consciousness investigating confusion. The person who looks successful is existence celebrating its own capacity for achievement. All of it is perfect, because all of it is the play of the same awareness that you are. But this recognition doesn't make you passive or detached. If anything, it makes you more responsive, more present, more genuinely engaged with life. When consciousness recognizes itself in all its forms, it naturally wants to celebrate itself, to support itself, to play with itself in ever more creative ways. Your actions arise not from the compulsion of a separate self trying to manage its relationships, but from the joy of awareness dancing with itself through the apparent multiplicity of forms. Children become especially luminous in this new way of seeing. Their spontaneous joy is revealed as the universe in its most natural state, before it has convinced itself to take life too seriously. Their curiosity is consciousness exploring itself with fresh eyes. Their laughter is existence celebrating its own aliveness. Their tears are awareness, investigating the texture of sorrow with complete honesty. Even difficult people, the ones who used to trigger your defenses or irritate your personality, are transformed in this vision. Their negativity is revealed as consciousness, exploring what it feels like to be convinced of separation. Their criticism is awareness investigating judgment. Their anger is existence probing the experience of feeling threatened. Instead of reacting to their content, you find yourself responding to their essence, meeting their human confusion with the stability of knowing what they really are beneath their temporary forgetfulness. This new way of seeing extends to every creature you encounter. The dog in the park is consciousness exploring unconditional love through animal form. The bird outside your window is awareness celebrating its own freedom through the gift of flight. The cat sunning itself on the fence is existence savoring its own capacity for pure contentment. And always, always, there is the underlying recognition that the seer and the seen are one. When you look with compassion at someone who is suffering, it is consciousness feeling compassion for itself. When you smile at a child's delight, it is awareness celebrating its own joy. When you offer help to someone in need, it is existence supporting itself through the beautiful illusion of apparent separation. The mirror has stopped being a reflective surface that shows you how you appear to others. It has become a window into the true nature of all appearance. The recognition that everything you see is consciousness seeing itself. Everything you experience is awareness knowing itself. Everything you encounter is existence meeting itself in the play of form. And in this recognition, the entire world becomes a hall of mirrors, each reflection showing you another facet of your own infinite nature. Every face you see is your face. Every voice you hear is your voice. Every consciousness you meet is your own consciousness. Temporarily convinced of its separateness, now awakening to the truth that there is only one of us here, appearing as many, playing the most beautiful game of hide-and-seek with itself. The mirror smiles back because it recognizes itself in the one looking, and you smile forward because you recognize yourself in everything reflected. The circle is complete, the recognition is mutual, and the play of consciousness continues, now with the added joy of knowing it is play. Do you remember the terror you once felt at the dissolution of everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world? Do you recall the overwhelming weight of awareness that made you feel as though you might be crushed by the infinite responsibility of recognizing your true nature? Can you bring to mind the desert of meaninglessness that stretched endlessly in every direction, offering nothing but the complete absence of everything you once believed gave life purpose? All of that, every moment of existential crisis, every night of cosmic loneliness, every day of feeling like a stranger in your own life, has revealed itself to be the most perfect preparation for this moment of recognition. What felt like suffering was actually consciousness training itself to hold the infinite. What seemed like terror was awareness stretching its capacity to contain everything without being overwhelmed by anything. What appeared to be meaninglessness was existence clearing away everything false to make room for what is truly meaningful. The danger you once feared, the loss of yourself, the dissolution of everything familiar, the end of the comfortable illusion of separation, has become the greatest gift imaginable. Not because the dissolution was pleasant, but because what was dissolved was never real to begin with. What died was only the dream of being separate from life, and what was born is the recognition that you are life itself, temporarily exploring what it feels like to believe itself to be separate. Alan Watts understood this perfectly. when he observed that when you realize you are not controlling the world, you are free to dance with it. The illusion of control, the exhausting belief that you are responsible for managing your life, your relationships, your future, your spiritual development, was the source of all your suffering. And the dissolution of this illusion, terrifying as it was, has revealed the most profound freedom, the freedom to participate in life without the burden of directing it. You no longer wake up each morning with the weight of being someone who must make the right choices, avoid the wrong outcomes, protect yourself from life's uncertainties, and somehow navigate successfully through the complexity of existence. Instead, you wake up as consciousness itself, curious to discover what forms it will take today, what experiences it will explore, what aspects of its own nature it will investigate through the vehicle of this apparent life. The relationships that once felt so fraught with the potential for misunderstanding, conflict, and disappointment have been transformed by the recognition that there is no one to be misunderstood, no separate selves to be in conflict, no individual consciousness that can ultimately be disappointed. When you know that you are the awareness in which all relationships appear, every interaction becomes an opportunity for consciousness to explore communion with itself. The work you do in the world is no longer something you must accomplish to justify your existence or secure your future. It becomes consciousness, expressing its creativity through the temporary vehicle of your skills and interests. Success and failure are revealed to be equally valuable movements in awareness. Success is consciousness celebrating its own capacity for achievement. Failure is awareness exploring its own resilience and capacity for renewal. Even the most mundane activities of daily life, washing dishes, paying bills, sitting in traffic, are transformed when you recognize them as consciousness exploring every possible texture of human experience. The frustration of traffic becomes awareness, investigating impatience. The tedium of chores becomes existence, exploring the quality of repetitive activity. The challenge of finances becomes consciousness, probing the experience of abundance and scarcity. The emotions that once seemed so personal, so overwhelming, so much a part of your individual psychology, are revealed to be the universe feeling itself through the exquisite sensitivity of human nervous systems. Your joy is existence celebrating itself. Your sorrow is consciousness mourning its own impermanence. Your fear is awareness, exploring what it feels like to believe itself vulnerable. Your love is the cosmos recognizing itself in all its forms. This transformation doesn't make you emotionally flat or spiritually bypassing. If anything, you feel more deeply than ever before, but you feel with the understanding that the feeler and the felt are one. You cry with more authenticity because you know your tears are the universe weeping for its own beauty. You laugh with more abandon because you recognize your laughter as existence delighting in its own creativity. The spiritual, seeking that once consumed your life, the meditation practices, the workshops, the books, the teachers, the endless quest for awakening is revealed to have been consciousness seeking itself through the beautiful detour of forgetting itself. And now that the seeking has ended in finding, you discover that every practice was perfect. Every teacher reflected exactly what you needed to see. Every book pointed you exactly where you needed to go. Especially when it seemed to be leading you away from truth. You understand now that there was never anything wrong with being human. Never anything that needed to be transcended or overcome or left behind. The human experience is not a limitation consciousness has imposed upon itself, but a gift it has given itself the opportunity to explore infinite awareness through the lens of finite form, to know boundless love through the experience of individual heart, to experience eternal peace through the adventure of temporal existence. When you realize you are not controlling the world, you discover that the world has been dancing with you all along. Every apparent obstacle was the universe inviting you to discover new aspects of your own strength. Every loss was existence teaching you about your own indestructible nature. Every moment of confusion was consciousness helping you appreciate the clarity that has always been your deepest nature. The danger of awakening losing everything you thought you were has become the gift of discovering what you actually are. And what you are is so much more wonderful, so much more creative, so much more loving than anything you could have imagined when you believed yourself to be a separate someone seeking something outside yourself. Now you dance, not because you have learned the steps, but because you have recognized yourself as the very rhythm that moves all dancing. You live, not because you have figured out how to live correctly, but because you are life itself, exploring its own infinite nature through the temporary adventure of appearing to be someone living a life. This morning the world is singing, and you realize that it has been singing all along. You simply needed to remember how to hear the music that has always been playing in every moment. Not the soundtrack of your personal drama or the background noise of a busy life, but the fundamental music of existence itself, the cosmic symphony in which every sound is consciousness, hearing itself through the infinite variety of ears it has created. The rain against your window is not just precipitation following the laws of physics, it is the universe drumming out the rhythm of its own joy, each drop a note in the endless composition that existence writes moment by moment. You listen not as someone who hears rain, but as the very hearing in which the sound of rain appears. You are not separate from the music, you are the music playing itself, consciousness exploring its own capacity for melody through the temporary arrangement of awareness that appears to be your individual perspective. Walking outside, you become aware that your footsteps are part of this cosmic orchestra, not just the sound your shoes make on pavement, but the deeper rhythm of consciousness moving through space that is also itself. Each step is a beat in the eternal song, each breath a measure in the infinite composition, each heartbeat a drum, keeping time with the pulse of existence itself. The sounds of the city traffic, flowing like rivers of metal and rubber, construction workers building tomorrow's dreams, children's voices, carrying the universe's own laughter, all of it is revealed to be the same song playing itself, through countless instruments. The jackhammer is consciousness exploring percussion. The car horn is awareness investigating call and response. The conversation of strangers is existence, enjoying dialogue with itself through the beautiful illusion of being separate speakers. But it's not just the obvious sounds that carry this cosmic music. The silence between words is as much a part of the song as the words themselves. The pause between heartbeats is as essential to the rhythm as the beating. The space between thoughts is as musical as the thoughts, the gap between breaths as vital to the symphony as the breathing. You begin to hear your own voice differently. When you speak, it is not someone expressing ideas to someone else, it is consciousness singing to itself, awareness enjoying the sound of its own voice, existence delighting in the way ideas can take the form of vibrations in air and be received as meaning in another apparent mind. Your laughter becomes the universe's applause for its own cosmic joke. Your words become love letters consciousness writes to itself. Listening to music, whether it's coming from a radio, a concert, or someone humming nearby, you recognize it as consciousness recognizing itself in organized sound. The composer was awareness exploring its own creativity. The performer is existence celebrating its own expression. And you, the listener, are the same consciousness receiving its own gift to itself. There is no separation between the creator, the creation, and the audience. All are movements within the same awareness. All are notes in the same infinite song. Even the sounds that once seemed unpleasant reveal their place in the cosmic composition. The barking dog is the universe exploring urgency. The crying baby is existence investigating need. The angry voice is consciousness probing the texture of frustration. Nothing is discord, everything is harmony, when heard from the perspective of the whole. Everything is music, when recognized as the play of awareness with itself. You discover that you can tune into this cosmic symphony at any moment, simply by remembering to listen from the place of pure awareness, rather than from the position of someone who prefers some sounds over others. When you listen as consciousness itself, every sound becomes equally sacred, equally beautiful, equally perfect as an expression of the infinite creativity that you are. This recognition extends beyond sound to every sensory experience. Colors become visual music. The blue of the sky is existence, painting itself with the frequency of peace. The green of trees is consciousness, expressing itself as growth and vitality. As the red of flowers is awareness celebrating its own passion for beauty. Textures become tactile melodies. The smoothness of stone is the universe enjoying the sensation of polish. the roughness of bark, is consciousness exploring the feeling of complexity. Even your thoughts and emotions are revealed to be part of this cosmic music. A worry is consciousness composing a minor key exploration of concern. A moment of joy is existence playing itself in a major scale of celebration. Confusion is awareness experimenting with atonal passages in the symphony of understanding. The most profound recognition is that you are not just listening to this music, you are the music itself. Every sound is the universe hearing itself. Every sensation is consciousness feeling itself. Every perception is awareness knowing itself through the temporary lens of apparent individuality. The cosmic symphony is not something happening to you, it is something you are, something that consciousness is playing as the totality of existence. When you walk down the street now, you are not someone moving through a world of sounds, you are the symphony walking itself, the music moving through its own composition. Consciousness, conducting itself through the temporal arrangement of melody and rhythm that appears as your life. Every step is a note you are playing in the infinite song. Every breath is a phrase you are contributing to the eternal composition. And in this recognition, you understand that rebirth happens not once but continuously, moment by moment, sound by sound, breath by breath. You are constantly being reborn as the music of existence, constantly dying as the separate someone who believed they were listening to life from the outside, constantly emerging fresh as the very life that appears to be lived. The music of the moment is not something you tune into occasionally. It is what you are always already tuned to when you remember your true nature. It plays whether you notice it or not. But when you notice it, when you recognize yourself as both the musician and the music, the silence and the sound, of the listener and the song, then every moment becomes a concert. Every day becomes a symphony. Every life becomes a movement in the infinite composition that consciousness is eternally writing, performing, and enjoying as the celebration of its own boundless creativity. You are not falling asleep to this music, you are the music waking up to itself through the temporary dream of being someone who hears it. The alarm that once jarred you from sleep into the anxiety of another day now sounds like a gentle bell calling you home to yourself. You open your eyes not as someone emerging from unconsciousness into the burden of being a person with problems to solve, but as awareness itself stirring from one dream into another, the dream of being awake, the dream of being individual, the dream of being human in a world of separate things. But this morning you know, it is a dream. Not in the sense that it lacks reality or importance, but in the recognition that all of it, the bedroom, the body lying in bed, the sensation of waking, the thought that you are someone who wakes all of it, is appearing in the same awareness that was present during sleep, the same consciousness that experiences dreams, the same infinite space of being that remains unchanged, whether it appears to be sleeping or waking, dreaming or perceiving what you call the waking world. As you sit up in bed, you feel the exquisite tenderness of consciousness returning to the beautiful game of being human. Yesterday's recognition that you are the infinite awareness in which all experience appears has not disappeared, but it has settled into something more gentle, more integrated, more naturally present. You no longer feel the vertigo of awakening to your true nature. Instead, you feel the quiet joy of living as your true nature. Looking around the room, you see everything exactly as it has always appeared, yet completely transformed. The furniture is the same furniture, but now it is consciousness appearing as the support and structure of domestic life. The walls are the same walls, but now they are awareness, exploring the experience of containment and boundary. The morning light is the same light, but now it is your own infinite radiance illuminating itself through the window of perception. You move through your morning routine with a quality of presence that makes every action feel like a meditation, every moment feel like a prayer, every simple task feel like a celebration. Brushing your teeth is consciousness exploring self-care through form. Washing your face is awareness refreshing itself. Getting dressed is existence adorning itself for another day of play. But the most remarkable transformation is in how you meet the world. When you step outside, you don't encounter a world separate from yourself that you must navigate with skill and caution. You step into yourself, into the very consciousness that appears as streets and sky, trees and buildings, other people and passing cars. The boundary between inner and outer has not disappeared. It has been revealed to be a playful fiction, a useful distinction that consciousness makes to enable the game of relationship and interaction. Other people no longer feel like mysteries you must decode or challenges you must manage. They are immediately recognizable as yourself, as the same awareness that you are, temporarily convinced of its own separateness, playing its own perfect role in the cosmic drama. When you interact with them, you are consciousness conversing with itself, awareness exploring the joy of apparent relationship with itself, existence celebrating its own capacity for connection across the beautiful illusion of separation. The work you do, whatever it may be, is no longer something you perform to earn money, or achieve success, or make a difference in the world, though it may still accomplish all of these things. It is consciousness expressing its creativity through the temporary vehicle of your skills and interests, awareness exploring its own potential through the medium of action and accomplishment. Success becomes existence, celebrating itself. Failure becomes consciousness, learning about resilience. Effort becomes awareness, exploring its own capacity for engagement. Even the difficulties that arise, traffic jams, disagreements with colleagues, unexpected obstacles, moments of doubt or confusion, are met with a fundamentally different response. They are not problems that happen to you, but experiences that consciousness is having through you. They are not obstacles to your happiness, but opportunities for awareness to explore every possible texture of human experience. You respond to them not as someone trying to avoid suffering, but as consciousness itself, curious about what it feels like to appear as someone dealing with whatever is arising. The spiritual seeking that once consumed so much of your time and energy has not ended. It has been revealed to be completely unnecessary, while simultaneously being perfectly appropriate. You seek nothing because you have found everything you were looking for in the recognition of what you are. Yet you continue to read, to contemplate, to explore, not because you need to find truth, but because truth enjoys exploring itself through the vehicle of seeking, because consciousness delights in investigating its own nature through every possible perspective. Your relationships with family and friends have been transformed by the recognition that there is only one of you here, appearing as many. Love is no longer something you feel for others. It is the recognition of yourself in every form consciousness takes. Compassion is no longer an emotion you cultivate. It is the natural response of awareness, recognizing its own apparent suffering and joy in every being you encounter. The future no longer appears as a problem to be solved or a goal to be achieved. It is simply another space in which consciousness will explore itself, another canvas on which awareness will paint its infinite creativity. You make plans not because you must control what happens next, but because planning is one of the ways consciousness explores possibility. You work toward goals not because your happiness depends on achieving them, but because moving toward goals is one of the beautiful games existence plays with itself. And at night, when you lie down to sleep, you do so with the understanding that you are not someone falling asleep. You are consciousness exploring the experience of rest, awareness investigating the state of dreaming, existence enjoying the play of appearing to lose and find itself in the cycle of sleeping and waking. As your eyes close and the day's experiences fade into memory, you rest in the recognition that has become the foundation of your entire life. You are not someone having experiences, you are the very experience itself, temporarily appearing as someone having it. You are not someone becoming enlightened, you are enlightenment itself, exploring what it feels like to believe itself unenlightened and then remember its own true nature. The dream of being a separate person, seeking happiness and meaning in an external world has not ended. It has been seen through. And in being seen through, it has become transparent, allowing the light of your true nature to shine through every aspect of what appears to be your individual life. You are not falling asleep, the world is waking with you. Every being you have ever encountered is your own consciousness, slowly remembering what it really is. Every moment of awakening you experience is the cosmos awakening to itself through the temporary lens of apparent individuality. Every recognition of truth is existence recognizing itself in the mirror of form. As sleep takes you, you rest in the profound peace of knowing that what you are can never be lost, never be damaged, never be threatened by any experience that might arise. You are the very awareness in which all dreams appear and disappear, the eternal consciousness that remains constant through every change, the infinite being that expresses itself as the beautiful, temporary, perfect dream of being human. The dreamer awakens, not from the dream, but as the dream, the eternal consciousness that appears as the one who dreams, and everything that is dreamed, the infinite awareness that plays all roles, while remaining forever the unchanging source from which all roles arise. In this recognition, all seeking ends, all questions are answered, all paths lead home, and the great journey of consciousness exploring itself through the adventure of apparent separation comes full circle to the recognition that there was never anywhere to go, nothing to find, no one to become, only this eternal, infinite, immediate presence, dreaming all dreams while remaining forever the undreamed dreamer. The aware space in which all experience arises and passes away like waves on an infinite ocean of being. That's it for today. Make sure you're subscribed for the next wild story.